Alright, so today I would like to discuss the 2025 Rivian R1S SUV and R1T pickup truck. So, some background about Rivian as a company and these cars is that Rivian makes luxury electric cars. They've only been around for a few years, and they only have two models right now, the R1S SUV and R1T pickup truck. Now they are making the R2S and R2T SUV and pickup truck and the R3S and R3T pickup SUV and pickup truck, which should be cheaper and smaller than the R1S and R1T. The R1S and R1T are pretty much their best models that have been around since 2022, and they actually got refreshed for 2025. So now the changes are different powertrain options, slightly lower starting MSRPs, and just other minor insignificant changes that I won't bother to discuss. So I do want to discuss the Rivian R1S and R1T now that these cars and the company has been around for a few years, to see if they're actually worth the money or if this is just one big hype. So first I'm going to look at the R1S SUV, and there's a few trim levels. There's 5 trim levels: the Dual Standard, the Dual Large, the Dual Max, the Tri-Max, and the Quad Max. Now, if I'm not mistaken, because I could be mistaken, I believe the lower 2 trim levels, the Dual Standard and the Dual Large, are 7-seaters for the R1S, and the 3 higher trims, the Dual Max, the Tri-Max, and the Quad Max, are all 5-seaters. Now, the Quad Max is the most powerful one, and it's not available till 2025. And I don't even know how much this Quad Max Rivian costs, although it does seem pretty cool, the top trim Quad Max. So we're going to forget about that for now. It's not even out yet. So the actual trims right now are the Dual Standard, the Dual Large, the Dual Max, and the Tri-Max. Now, if it says Dual, that means 2 motors, and Tri means 3 motors. And I see the difference between the Standard Dual, the Large Dual, and the Max Dual is the battery pack. And as I said, if the trim level says Max in it, it's a 5-seater. If it says Standard or Large, it's a 7-seater. Now, for the Max, as you can see, you could get it in 2 motors, 3 motors, or 4 motors. And the Max versions are going to have the most range. It's going to be, at least for the dual motor Max, it's over 400-mile range. Whereas with the Standard and the Large is going to be a 330-mile range, and the Standard is going to be a 270-mile range. Although, one thing that I would like to go over for the Dual Large and the Dual Max is they're going to have the same performance as the Dual Standard in the default variant. But in order to get the better performance in the Dual Large or the Dual Max, you have to spend $5,000 extra. Up to you whether it's worth it or not. Now, one thing I do like about Rivian versus other brands like BMW and Mercedes is with Rivian, you could get the cheapest version of the model and it still feels like you're getting a great product. Whereas with brands like BMW and Mercedes, you really do have to spend at least a few $1,000s in options so the car starts to feel good. So right now I'm looking at the cheapest Rivian, which is the Dual Standard, 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds. Whereas the more expensive ones Some of them do 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds, and some of them do 0 to 60 in 3.4 seconds. Now, in my opinion, for an SUV like this, especially given that it has instant torque due to being electric, 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds is more than enough. Now, if I was to personally get this vehicle, I would either get the Dual Large without the performance upgrade or the Dual Max without the performance upgrade. Now, I think if you have the money, the Dual Max is definitely the way to go for the better range. But if you really need the 7-seat capacity that the Dual Max lacks, the Dual Large is still a great vehicle. But first I'll focus on the Dual Standard, which is, it's still a nice car on the inside. You still get the same interior as all the other higher trims with all the same features and stuff. So really with Rivian, there's not that much to upgrade, although you can change the badging and accents from chrome to black for extra. You could add wood trim. They have 2 options for interior color, black and this light gray. Then even with the floor mats, you could either do dark floor mats or light floor mats. And even with the rims, there's a few options. Now, one thing I do find interesting is these 20-inch wheels you can only get on the Dual Standard, and no idea why, but I think even if there's a little bit of range sacrifice, most people going off-road will probably want these 20-inch wheels just because they come with all-terrain tires, whereas people who have no intention off-roading this and are only going to use it on the pavement are probably going to prefer the 22-inch wheels just for the better range. So that's just the overview of the R1S. I think in my opinion, and I'm going to discuss this versus the competitors in a bit, but in my opinion, if you want a higher end electric luxury SUV, this is the one to buy. Unless you get a really good deal on one of the German competitors, which in this market is possible, especially if you're leasing. Which, speaking of Rivian leases, I haven't looked into them, but relative to the MSRPs of these vehicles, the lease payments do seem low. So I do think if you're in the market for a Rivian, maybe purchasing could be a good option, but it's also worth looking at the lease programs for these vehicles. And even compared to the competition like Mercedes EQE and EQS SUVs, BMW iX, Audi Q6 and Q8 e-tron SUVs, I think the Rivian is a very compelling option. Now, the only SUV in this segment that I probably necessarily wouldn't recommend to someone who prioritizes luxury is maybe the Tesla Model X, even though it's a great vehicle, just because compared to the rest of the competition, the interior definitely feels kind of bland on the Tesla Model X. So now, enough with the R1S. I'm gonna move on to the R1T pickup truck, which the R1T pickup truck is actually about $6,000 cheaper than the R1S but although on the used market, the R1Ss are slightly more expensive than the R1Ts, which makes sense. Which honestly, between the two, I would honestly not let pricing sway you towards one or the other. But that's just me. I think the bigger deal should be whether you want an SUV or you want a pickup truck. Now, for most people, the SUV is probably going to be the better fit. But if you want the pickup truck, the R1T is a great choice too. So obviously, as you can see, here are the trim levels, same as the R1S, and the performance is pretty identical too compared to the R1S, so I won't go into much to that. Even the features and all, compared to Rivian R1S, it's all identical. Not gonna dwell on it this time, although I do think, in my opinion, if I was to get this, I would just spend the extra money on the dual max and not think about it. Because not like with the R1S where the lower trims had 7 seats and the upper trims had 5 seats, With this being a pickup truck, all of them have 5 seats, so I would just spend the extra on the dual max. But again, I wouldn't go for the performance upgrade personally. I'm happy with the 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds. Although, if you prefer to save money and you don't care for as much range, even the dual standard is a good option, especially if you're in the crowd that qualifies for the $7,500 federal tax credit for either one of these vehicles, as the MSRP cap to get that tax credit for an SUV or pickup truck is $80,000, whereas with the sedan or just the normal car in general, it's $55,000. So that's something to look into for sure. And yeah, overall, I'd say these are both fantastic choices. If I was getting a Rivian personally, I think I would go for the R1S over the R1T. That's just my personal preference. You can't go wrong with either. But real quick, I do want to talk about competition for the Rivian R1T. And this is going to be interesting because the R1T Rivian is actually the only mid-size electric pickup truck on the market right now. All the other electric pickup trucks right now are full-size. And honestly, in my opinion, if you don't need the space of a full-size pickup truck, I think when it comes to electric pickup trucks, the Rivian R1T is the way to go. Just because I do feel it's a little bit superior to the full-size pickup trucks on the market that are electric, although those are great choices too. Now, there are rumors that Toyota is coming out with the Tacoma pickup truck as an electric vehicle, which would make for a second electric mid-size pickup truck, but that's obviously not going to be as nice as the Rivian, as fancy, but at the same time, it's going to be cheaper than the Rivian. So when that comes out between that and the Rivian, it's really just a matter of whether you're looking for a conventional pickup truck or a luxury pickup truck, but I'm sure you can't go wrong with either. And honestly, I think Rivian as a company is a fantastic company. I think in the long run, they will thrive, unlike maybe some of these other startup electric car companies, I think, especially after the R2 and R3 platform cars come out that are smaller and cheaper than the flagship R1 platform cars come out, I think Rivian will sell a lot and they'll do very well. And truthfully, just right now, I highly recommend any Rivian. Whether you want to get the cheapest model, the most expensive model, the smallest model, the largest model, SUV pickup truck, I think no matter which model you choose and how you configure it, every single Rivian out there is a fantastic buy. buy. And if you're interested in swapping out new cars every few years, check out their lease programs, as the payments do seem relatively low given the MSRPs of these vehicles. So that's gonna wrap it up for today. From now on, I will definitely try my best to upload every single week at least one longer video like this one and one YouTube short, and either later this year or early next year, I would definitely like to film like actual proper car reviews. So hopefully I get to that, but for now, I will see you in the next video.